the QMS Auditor Transition Series, Module 5, Process Design and Performance Evaluation.
What is a process anyway? So a process is nothing more than transforming inputs into outputs. You'll see here in this illustration, inputs are the requirements specified, including resources, interrelated or interacting activities that happen, plus control methods within the process itself, and then the output, which is the requirements satisfied or the results of the process. Typically, process outputs and overall process performance is evaluated through effectiveness or ability to achieve desired results, and efficiency, which is results achieved versus resources used. The ISO 9001 standard at clause 0.3 process approach has broken down a single process in the various elements of that single process. We have sources of input, inputs, activities, outputs, and receivers of outputs. This is a review. We saw this slide in an earlier module. The process approach. The process approach is any activity or set of activities that uses resources to transform inputs to outputs. The systematic identification and management of the process is employed within an organization, and particularly the interaction between such processes is referred to as the process approach. This illustration shows the traditional departmental approach, where you have functional silos, you have a department that is isolated and not connected to other departments. In this illustration, you see the process approach. Process 1, 2, 3, and 4 are clearly distinct processes, and they flow across multiple departments. However, it's probably not that simple. Processes typically look more so like this, where let's say the material management process is the yellow arrow. The material is likely to come in from an outside source, an outside provider, into Department A. Let's say Department A is either material management or the warehouse, and you see the material then flows from Department C to D. So this makes a process approach to managing and a process approach to auditing a bit more tricky, because you're more than likely going to have to go through multiple departments, multiple channels, multiple groups of personnel in order to follow the process approach to auditing. The automotive process approach, as defined in the rules, IATF rules, section 5.8, conducting on-site audit activities, is defined in the following. The certification body shall have a process for conducting on-site audits, taking into consideration the relevant guidance provided in ISO 19011, the IATF Auditor Guide for ISO TS 6949, and utilizing the automotive process approach. The automotive process approach ensures that priority is given to questioning the client's processes, the sequence and interaction, and performance against the measures defined, with a focus on the processes which directly impact the customer. Furthermore, the automotive process approach states questioning the process objectives and targets, with a focus on where targets are not being met, and focus on issues that have the greatest impact on the customer. Questioning what plans are in place to ensure targets are met, and corrective action plans where objectives are not being met. Following audit trails to linkages between customer concerns, performance against objectives, and relevant process documents such as control plans, FMEAs, etc. And finally, questioning the client's process for gathering, communicating, and implementing customer-specific requirements. So these are the rules of the road related to your registrar coming in and auditing you using an automotive process approach. So these are the rules that have been set forth to guide the actual certification bodies. You can find more about the automotive process approach online following this link, or by simply putting in automotive process approach in our website's search bar. So let's take a moment to discuss turtle diagrams and how they can be used for process mapping. So what is a turtle diagram? A turtle diagram is a quality tool used to visually display process characteristics such as inputs, outputs or expectations, criteria or metrics, and other high-level information to assist in the effective execution and improvement of business processes. You can see here the layout of the turtle, which is the head on the left, the shell and the various patterns on the shell, and the tail on the right. I was informed by a student about 3 years ago that the turtle, after probably 10 years of being presented, was in fact 180 degrees in the wrong direction. So I'll let you think about that for a second. Input, process, output. So that's a turtle diagram. So let's talk about some facts related to turtle diagrams. First of all, there's no requirement per 9001. It may be used as a lean documentation tool. It helps define necessary resources, which is one of the reasons that I strongly recommend using turtle diagrams. It helps define process expectations and key process indicators. It gives a visual instruction versus text or work instruction or SOP. And it's a one-page plan for every key business process you've identified within your management system. So here's an example of a one-page process map or turtle diagram. Let's break this down into further detail. So first of all, inputs, process, outputs, that's the primary lane. And then you have what, how, who, and the criteria, objectives, and targets for that turtle diagram. So the core of the turtle diagram are these three shapes here: your inputs, process, and outputs. The inputs, here you enter details of the actual process inputs, such as documents, materials, schedules, requirements, information, etc. In the middle, this is the process itself, so enter customer support or management process. For example, purchasing, if you're using a turtle diagram to define the purchasing process, then you put purchasing in this box here. And then outputs, enter details of the actual process output, such as product, documentation, records, etc., linked to an actual measure of effectiveness. And that measure we will put in the criteria box coming up here. On the top, you have the what and the who. So the what is equipment and material. You enter details of the machine, materials, test equipment, computer systems, software, etc. that's used in the process in this box. And then who, personnel and competencies. You enter the personnel requirements, including special skills, competency requirements, training requirements, restrictions, etc. Typically, this box will involve a cross-functional group of people, not just coming from one department, but various roles in various departments. On the bottom, you have the fields how. How is documentation methods. You enter linked process controls, support processes, instruction procedures, setup illustrations, specific methods used, etc. In this box, I typically see references to key procedures, work instructions, setup instructions, that sort of thing. And then finally on the bottom right, we have criteria, objectives, and targets. So enter the measures of the process effectiveness and efficiency, such as goals, targets, objectives, etc. So there's a bit of a controversy between the turtle diagrams, whether they're valuable or not. My question to you is, what ISO requirement prompts the use of turtle diagrams? What other tools can be used besides a turtle diagram? And what is used in your organization to define the processes of your QMS, your expectations for your QMS, metrics, etc.? So quickly to review my answers to these questions, I would say for item number 1, clause 4.1 is what prompts me to use a turtle diagram, defining the context of the organization, criteria, resource needs, etc., whether it be IATF 16949, ISO 9001, 2008, 2015. All of those have requirements associated with defining your QMS, defining the processes, defining resources, metrics, so on and so forth. So in my opinion, the turtle diagram does a great job at managing and helping companies with managing those requirements. Number 2, what other tools can be used? SIPOC diagrams can be used. SIPOC's different character illustrations can be used. I've seen whiteboard character animation created to help to define the story of an organization, where it is and where it wants to be and how it measures itself. For me, that's a little bit too complex for most of our customers, hence the use of a turtle diagram or SIPOC diagram. SIPOC is supplier, input, process, output, and customer. So it's expanded a little bit on the left and right side of a turtle. But to me, what a SIPOC diagram lacks is defining resources and how the turtle diagram or how the process is measured. So what is used in your organization, that's going to vary from one company to the next. So ask yourself, do you know what you use? And if you do use it, is it effective? Is it being used by the process owners and driven and maintained by the process owner themselves? So let's look at the PDCA model, which is Plan, Do, Check, Act, and how it connects to auditing, the process of auditing. Audit objectives. Audits are conducted for one or more of the following reasons: to ensure compliance to the requirements of internal, international, and industry standards and customer-specific requirements, to determine the effectiveness of the implemented system in meeting specified objectives, be it quality, environmental, financial, etc., to explore opportunities for improvement, to prevent problems before they occur, such as risk-based thinking, to meet statutory and regulatory requirements, to provide feedback to top management through a representative sample of the current condition of the management system, or to obtain a second or third party recognition, such as registration, accreditation, etc. Auditing in ISO 9001:2015 requires that audits be conducted at planned intervals to provide information on meeting QMS requirements, meeting standard requirements, and that your standard requirements in QMS are effectively implemented and maintained. Auditing program. So what do auditing programs have to consider in the 2015 version? First of all, process importance. How important is the process internally and to the customer? Changes. What changes have you experienced with regard to the process? Or what upcoming changes are coming that you want to get ahead of and evaluate risk for, etc.? And what were your previous audit results? Were they good, bad, as expected? Those 3 items need to be evaluated in terms of consideration for scheduling and conducting audits. Audits often also need to be conducted while defining audit criteria and the scope very clearly, so not only the auditee but the auditor knows exactly what's going to be audited, when, and what the criteria is. Auditor selection and conducting audits need to be done objectively, so with objectivity and also impartiality. And actually there's a requirement in ISO 9001-2008 that has been removed, which stated auditors shall not audit their own work. So I guess that means now you can audit your own work, you just have to maintain objectivity and impartiality in doing so. Audit results. They need to be reported to relevant management. There needs to be undue delay in corrective action. Audit results need to be retained as documented information, also known as keeping a record for audits, to provide evidence of an effective audit program and evidence of audit results. And there's a note referring to ISO 19011, which is a guidance document on management system audits. Looking at the metrics here, this is a business goal number 3 scorecard. This is just an example scorecard. The question is, where do we audit? And the answer is very, very simple. Ask your 3-year-old. Ask your 5-year-old. Where are the good spots? Where are the bad spots? And they'll easily tell you, you need to audit the red. You need to look at the yellow, assuming that the data is accurate, and red means bad, yellow means concern, and green means good. So making that assumption, that's how easy it is. You want to always start with data. So you can see the example here, start with data. Several of the indicators show red, so that's a concern. That's something that needs to be evaluated for higher importance or a status that is poor, and consideration should be in place for bumping up the audit, increasing the audit frequency, the depth of the audit, etc. So what are the measures here telling us? Who is at fault? Which employees should be punished? If that's what you're thinking when looking at this slide, then you need to evaluate your thought process. The first one, what are the measures here telling us? Definitely there are some stories and audit trails that can be gathered from looking at the data, and that becomes a starting point for putting an audit plan together and your audit checklist questions. But who's at fault and who should be punished should not be considered as a part of the audit. So we're auditing the process, not the people. So that's a bit of a trick question for the last 2 points there. In the second half of this module, we will look at the Management System Architect, 12 tools for the ultimate management system. We're going to explore how simple tools can help you master the processes you manage. So I was driving through the mountains of North Carolina several years ago, and I had a bit of an aha moment. I was listening to a TED Talk and came to the conclusion that I needed to create the Management System Architect. The TED Talk I was listening to was by Dr. Atul Gawande. We mentioned Dr. Atul Gawande in Module 1 and his talk on how do we heal medicine. This was from TED Talks April 2012. If you haven't yet done so, I would recommend following this link, or go to YouTube and search Dr. Atul Gawande. You'll see How Do We Heal Medicine pop up as a video for him. I was inspired by his talks primarily because of my affirmation that systematic approaches were very, very important, and all the pieces working together are what make an organization excellent, not just a select few people or a select few processes or departments or products. So check it out if you haven't done so already. One of the other illustrations that I also mentioned in Module 1 was this department approach versus the process approach on the right-hand side. The process approach obviously focuses on the effective outputs, efficient outputs, and that sort of thing. So in combination with this illustration and with the TED Talk and with my various years of experience in quality and teaching people what is required, it's a lot more fun to teach how management systems can be deployed, how you can achieve not only compliance but go well beyond compliance, and do so through a set of tools. Most people I know love tools. Artist Johann Wolfgang von Goethe stated, "Everyone hears only what he understands." And I believe that to be true as well. So let's create a set of tools and methodology that's very, very simple for process owners, managers, leaders, and everyone involved as a stakeholder in a process, easy to understand. So that's why I created the management system architecture. So the management system architecture is 12 very simple tools following the plan, do, check, act cycle. You'll see on the left, plan, do, check, act, and there are 3 tools for each row. Starting in the center tool on each row is the first tool to use, and you'll see there's a flow from 1 to 2 and over to 3, so on and so forth. So let's dive into tool number 1, which is the interaction of processes map. So interaction of processes map is one of the first few tools that can be used to satisfy clause 4.1 through 4.4. And what this does is it's very simple, a basic inventory of all of the processes of your quality management system. This could be used for environmental management system, health and safety management system as well. So any management system initiative that you're striving for or certification that you're striving for, this tool, along with all the other tools, can be applied and used in that quest for certification and overall system improvement. So let's use this fake company called the Acme Box Company. Here you see process 1, 2, 3, product design, corrugated operations, and converting operations. Those 3 are value-added processes. Then you have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which are support processes, and then you have 10 and 11 that are used to evaluate and improve the other processes of the management system. So this particular example, we have 11 distinct processes, and then each of these have sub-processes underneath them. You see the customer requirements coming in at the top. You see the customer satisfaction as an output on the top right. So very simple illustration, easy to follow, and this illustration should capture all of the moving pieces of your organization. So whatever is within scope of your quality management system, any associate working within your organization should be able to go up to this illustration and point to the specific processes in which they primarily work, and then those other processes that they work in part of the time or that they have a connection to or support. Tool number 2 is also very simple. It's a process ownership chart. So instead of being your traditional org chart, this process ownership chart, which could be combined with the traditional org chart, it is meant to define who, as it relates to who owns which of the 11 processes. So you can see here Brad Smith on the bottom right is the material manager, and Brad Smith owns process 9. So if we go back up to process 9, you will see on the bottom right that material management is process 9, and Brad is responsible for the ownership, the maintenance and improvement, and overall performance of that process number 9. And you map that out to all of the top managers, all of the process owners that are responsible for the ownership of processes 1 through 11. Tool number 3 is the applicability matrix. The applicability matrix can be used in a number of different ways. So in this particular case, we have the processes in the orange on the top, and the first example, you could see location 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to location 11. This is an applicability matrix that's being used to map how the different locations, sites, remote locations, sales locations around the globe connect to the top level processes. Okay, so this would be a map that would connect again the processes to the global locations. In this particular applicability matrix, what we're doing is we're mapping the requirements of the ISO 9001 standard that's on the left, that's represented by the various columns on the left, and how those clauses, those requirements of the standard, connect to the processes that are required up on the top. Turtle diagrams. Turtle diagram is tool number 4. We've reviewed the turtle diagram in detail in the first part of this module, but the idea here is for all 11 processes that are identified in tool number 1, you would have a one-page process map for all 11 of those processes. So this becomes the 5,000-foot view for the process owner. And I guess you could say tool number 1 up at the top could be the 50,000-foot view for the entire organization. So each of the 11 parts, again, have their own unique turtle diagram in tool number 4. Inputs, process, outputs, what, how, who, and criteria. And something that's important to point out here on this slide about criteria is that we'll see in tool number 7 that the aggregate from all of these boxes for each of the 11 turtle diagrams will all be pulled together into one spreadsheet called the Process Measures Dashboard, but we'll get to that one in a second. Tool 5 is broken up into 2 parts. Control of document, so you can ensure that the most relevant version of your documents are being distributed here. Off on the right, you can see the columns under the yellow headings. These are all the physical locations in which the document resides. This document can be used to ensure that you've got the right document name, the relevant revision and date. The rev level and rev date are very apparent. You're making sure you're using the correct version. And then also you can sort by process operation on the left, and if I'm a process owner, I can quickly sort out all of those documents that belong to the process that I have to manage. The Records tab on this tool is used to make sure that you're controlling the records or the retained documented information, as the standard puts it, per the minimum requirements. So these 21 that are listed here are 21 records at a minimum that you need to have for the baseline 9001 requirement. And then any other additional record that your company feels is important to keep, you can use this same tool. You just put those records down underneath these, or you can modify this any way that you feel works best for your organization. But perhaps you do the same thing and put some sort of process indicator in one of the columns so that, again, the process owner can sort by process and which records is he or she responsible for ensuring are maintained and controlled. You also have additional columns here for identification, storage, the various controls that are required for maintaining documented information. So you can use this one single spreadsheet to control not only your traditional documentation, but also the records that you have to retain. If you would like to read more about these tools and templates as it relates to the required documentation per ISO 9001:2015, you can use the link down on the bottom right, or you can go to our website and search ISO 9001:2015 required documentation. Tool number 6 is the competency tracker. So the training or competency tracker here is a great tool. It's very visual. This is something that you want to have out in a common area, so it's very clear who is responsible for what, who has what level of competency, what level of training. So on the competency passport here, you see Suzanne Greenberg has her title, date of hire, and then several columns for the various processes, procedures, or machine or equipment that she could be qualified on in her area. Now there are levels 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is in training, 2 is works under guidance, 3 is works independently, and 4 is a trainer. The idea here is when the training record has been completed for Suzanne to move to the next level of competency, she or a training coordinator will then gather those records and punch her competency passport card to indicate that she's moved to a new level of training, qualification, or competency. The aggregate of all of the competency passports come together on this competency matrix. The idea of the competency matrix is to be able to see in each area which associates are trained to what level. This also, with a key here at the bottom, you're able to see, for instance, this average competency score. You can see that there's a red or an F here in terms of the score, and that's because this particular operation has no trainer. Maybe the trainer has left or moved on to another area. And you can also see there's a C- here. There are only 2 people that can do this particular job or are fully trained and qualified in this particular function, and the idea is to have at least 3 or 4 people cross-trained for that particular job function. Same thing on the last column for this SOP3. There is someone that is in training, there's someone that is training with guidance, but there's no indication here of who the actual trainer is or who's qualified to do the training. Tool number 7, this is the process measures dashboard. This is the tool that I had mentioned earlier that pulls in the aggregate of all of the bottom right hand cells that are in the turtle diagram. So all of the criteria, all of the metrics that would be on each of the 11 turtle diagrams would all come down and flow into this aggregate of process measures dashboard. So this dashboard's pretty cool. I love this tool. What it does is it also gives you that red, yellow, green quick indicator of which processes are performing well or not. You can see here you have process 1 through 11 on the left-hand column under process, and then the method of measure is in column 2. You have your key plant indicators at the top and then the process indicators in the middle on the scorecard. At the bottom you have a QMS overall score. In this particular case it's number of points possible, which is 27 measures, and 12 of the 27 are green, therefore the overall QMS score is 44. Something that is also great about this tool, although it's not very well represented here in this illustration, is that you have an action registry off on the right hand side. So if action is needed because of a yellow or a red, the action should be recorded there. So up here you have key process indicators. This is, again, not the best example in the world because this particular company appears to just be focused on profit margin and annual sales, but maybe that's what their focus needs to be for that particular point in time, for that particular year. For this example, you have the key process indicators up there, and then the PPIs, which is process performance indicators, in the body of this dashboard. So to break it down a bit more, the aggregate of criteria from each of the turtle diagrams is in the method of measures column. The high-level goals are in yellow at the top. The expectations translated to local language or process level language is in each of the cells under the process customer loyalty. And you see monitoring of process outputs versus objectives here. Personally, I think Q1, Q2, Q3, that is maybe a good place to start, but eventually looking at your process measures monthly, if not more frequently than that, is probably the better idea. And then off to the right, as mentioned in the last slide, you're tracking your action items. So in this particular case, Kappa 064, Diversify Customer Mix Project, is the name of the project that's being used to correct the performance issues that we're seeing with this particular process measure. Now we're on to tool number 8, audit schedule. Before we jump into the details there, you can see that there is a 2-directional arrow both on tool 8 and tool 9. And the idea there is that the audit schedule, as well as the management review tracker, which is tool number 9, should be relationally connected to the process measures dashboard. So if there is a process or multiple processes that aren't performing well, you should be looking at those processes more frequently, doing a deeper dive of those processes with your audit schedule, as well as having more in the way of management review or management attention, management focus. So that's why those arrows have both directions indicated in between the tools there. So you can see on the left, the process audits are process 1 through 11. And in this example, you can see that you have some that are grayed out with an arrow. That indicates that a process was scheduled for January, and both 3 of those processes have been moved forward to March. So I would question that. And I want to check as an internal auditor, an auditor going to my supplier site, and certainly a third-party auditor, how frequently do you schedule audits that then get moved, and what is the purpose of them being rescheduled? You can also see that you have a variety of different colors. Let's say the red squares under February. Perhaps it's March or later in the year, and you had scheduled February process 1 and process 10 to be audited in February, but they were never audited. So therefore they're late and they're not rescheduled, so that particular item is red. So there are a variety of different ways you can use this. If you look at the month of March, for example, the corrugated operation, so there were 2 nonconformities that were found, or 2 corrective actions that were requested, and 0 have been closed out. That bottom right 4th quadrant represents implementation and effectiveness of action needed. So the reason why that's yellow is, I would imagine that we're in this scenario still in the month of March, and we have 2 corrective actions that are due that have not yet been closed out. Therefore, you see the 2 and the 0 that is yellow. So this can be used in a ton of different ways. The reason why I really like this particular tool, like most of them, is it's one page. It's easy to understand what the status is of current audits during the current time frame, the results from previous audits, and also those audits that are coming up. And we know with the IATF 16949 requirements that now you have to have a 3 calendar year audit schedule laid out So creating one of these for the current year in the next 2 years is a very, very simple way to satisfy that requirement. Tool number 9 is the Management Review Tracker. This is very similar to the internal auditing tool in that it uses the items to be reviewed on the left, and the months are the column headings starting with January over to December. In this particular tool, we have 11 line items, but they're not the 11 processes. These are in fact 11 different management review inputs that the 9001-2015 standard requires to be reviewed. So the way that this is laid out is your 1, 2, 3, and 4 quadrants indicate the weeks of the month in which you're supposed to review those particular management review input items. So for example, adequacy of resources. Adequacy of resources is being looked at in the 3rd week of every other month, and that seems to work well in terms of frequency for that particular organization. You can see on the bottom opportunities for improvement in January 1, 2, 3, 4, all 4 weeks. That particular line item needs to be reviewed, that agenda item needs to be reviewed. And I'm not sure what the red would mean. The red could indicate that they did not cover any opportunities for improvement. That may be that the case where opportunities for improvement were identified, but nothing was actually done with regard to those improvements that were identified. You can use your own rules, but these tools represent a very good starting point for you to dial in and configure the tool in a way that works best for your organization. Tool number 10, Action Tracker. So the Action Tracker works like a funnel. And the idea is, let's take all of our actions be it for opportunities, for risk, for nonconformities in product, material, process, big problems, small problems, big ideas, projects, whatever, put them all in this Action Tracker and treat it like a hopper. And what we want to use the hopper for is understanding those items that are high impact and in which ones should be prioritized. So you'll always have more action items to do than you'll have the bandwidth and resources to actually get done. So what this does is it allows you to stay organized, pull all of your actions, be them proactive, reactive, big or small, into one sheet, and use this sheet to track that action from birth all the way through to closure. Now, some of the actions will be proactive, and that's where tool 11 comes in, and we'll see reactive on tool 12. So tool 11, this is proactive. This is your risk management or your risk prevention, your risk-based thinking side. The idea here is to use a variety of different tools, either as simple as a SWOT analysis, where you're looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then working to take the opportunities, threats, and weaknesses and improve those or mitigate those risks or threats. And then your strengths, you want to continue to strengthen your strengths as well. So SWOT analysis is a very, very simple tool to use versus FMEA, which is failure modes and effects analysis, which is much more difficult to use. It's a great, great tool, but it's certainly a lot more complex. And the idea, in short, of the FMEA is to rank from 1 to 10 the severity, how severe is the issue as it relates internally or to the customer, the occurrence ranking, how likely is it this failure to occur, and detection. What is the risk ranking from 1 to 10 associated with detection? That gives you a risk priority number, or RPN, that would be anywhere from 1 to 1,000. And the way you get up to 1,000 would be if you ranked severity a 10 times occurrence, which was a 10, and detection at a 10. That would give you your worst case scenario risk and you use this tool in order to mitigate those risks and reduce the overall RPN, or risk priority number, over time. So these are two tools from very simple to a little bit more complex, but definitely both very, very good for managing risk and lowering risk on a regular, continuous basis. And finally, we have tools number 12, which is corrective action and improvement. And these are two reports here, or one report on the left, which is an actual form, a corrective action report. This is your traditional track for something that's severe enough to be driven down to root cause and managed through short-term correction, long-term corrective action, and then verification and validation to ensure that the action taken was effective to prevent recurrence. So that's your traditional corrective action report, although I would say our version is the best that I've seen outside of expensive software. If you're interested in the corrective action report, along with any of the other tools, you can check those out on our website as well to see the actual templates. And then off to the right here, you have DMAIC, Six Sigma project, or value stream mapping, so on and so forth. So these would be whatever your organization has identified as the improvement, the continual improvement type tools. And I would remind you that IATF 16949, clause 10.3 now requires you to document what that improvement process is, and several other details as it relates to your tools for improvement. Making systems work is the great task of my generation of physicians and scientists, but I would go further and say making systems work, whether in healthcare, education, climate change, making a pathway out of poverty, is the task of our generation as a whole. So this was a very profound quote that hit me at a great time in my life where I needed a bit of affirmation as to the importance of systems. This was one of the final statements by Dr. Atul Gawande during his TED Talks. I would like to acknowledge him and his TED Talks for being a very good inspiration for me as a management system practitioner, and I hope this message treats you well as well. This concludes our QMS Auditor Transition Series. I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to your feedback. Follow us at concentricglobal.co. My name is Jim Thompson. It's been a pleasure. See you again soon.